Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 148 of Be With Me. I'm going to title today is I Want You to Blaspheme, because that was what Paul's modus operandi was before he became a Christian. I want you to blaspheme. Paul's in trial before his first king. Let's listen. This is Acts 25, and I'm going to flip over to Acts 26 here in just a second. Agrippa, who's a king, Paul's first king, said to Festus, who's a Roman procurator, governor guy, I would like to hear from the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you will hear him. So the next day, Agrippa and Bernice, that's his sister, came with great pomp, and they entered the audience hall with military tribunes. Those are guys that are in charge of 1,000 men. So there's multiple guys that are in charge of 1,000 men. So these are the generals with their, medals on their chest. So he describes the military people are there as well as the secular people and the prominent men of the city. Then at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. But I found that he had done nothing deserving death, and as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definite to write to my lord, the Caesar, about him. Therefore, I have brought him before you all, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable in sending a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. All right, so now we're in chapter 26. So Agrippa said to Paul, you have permission to speak for yourself. And Paul stretched out his hand and made his defense. Quote, I consider myself fortunate that it is before you, King Agrippa, that I'm going to make my defense today and against all the accusations of the Jews, especially because you're familiar with all the customs and controversies of the Jews. Therefore, I beg you to listen to me patiently. My manner of life from my youth spent at the beginning among my own nation and in Jerusalem is known by all the Jews. They have known for a long time, if they are willing to testify, that according to the strictest party of our religion, I have lived as a Pharisee. And now I stand here on trial because of my hope in the promise made to God our Father. That's an important line. To which our 12 tribes hope to attain as they earnestly worship night and day. And for this hope I am accused by the Jews, O king. Why is it thought incredible by any of you that God raises the dead? I myself was convinced that I ought to do many things in opposing the name of Jesus of Nazareth. So then these are the last two verses. Listen carefully. And I did so in Jerusalem. I not only locked up many of the saints in prison after receiving authority from the chief priests, but when they were put to death, I cast my vote against them. Last verse. And I punished them often in all the synagogues and tried to make them blaspheme. And in raging fury against them, I persecuted them even to foreign cities. All right, so two big points today. Number one is Paul receives authority from the chief priests, which is interesting because where do the chief priests get it? They get it from King Agrippa. This Agrippa II, Herod Agrippa II, his grandfather was Herod the Great, Herod the Builder, who had rebuilt the temple, and I think probably they threw his family line a bone and said, okay, you guys can be in charge of the temple and in charge of the leaders of the temple, which are the chief priests. So of interest, the people that Paul was working for when he persecuted Christians, essentially the authority went all the way back to this guy, to Agrippa II. So if there are, murders of Christians and imprisonment and death of Christians, ultimately it's actually on Agrippa II, who's listening to him. It's on his hands, which I think is kind of interesting. All right, the second thing is he's trying to get him to blaspheme. So what is that? It is to speak outrageously. It's to drop evil or profane words. It's either to shoot short of the words, that is, give no weight to God, or to give, inaccurate and harsh and reviling and slander the sacred. It's to speak inappropriately of the sacred, speak irreverently of the sacred, speak disrespectfully. And so Paul is using all his powers. He's using the physical powers of imprisonment. He's using the physical powers of locking people up and depriving people of their liberty. He's using the power of punishment in the synagogues and persecution to foreign cities. In other words, pursuit. So he's using his authority kind of in a bad way that has actually come from King Agrippa to pursue Christians even all the way unto death, which he says he casts his votes. So this is a fight over belief and belief, words, and hope. It's because it's a kingdom of belief, hope, and ideas. And he's trying to get people to change their ideas and to speak against the Lord and try to make them blaspheme. All right. So final thoughts. It's important for me, Paul, in his earlier life, to try to get Christians to blaspheme. That is, I don't like your beliefs so much that I'm going to use all my agency of power, prison, persecution, and pursuit to change your mind and hopefully change your mouth and get you to speak evil of the Lord. So this, as you see, is a battle for ideas, for hope and faith. It's not land that we're fighting over or countries or oil fields. The treasure is, what treasure are we fighting over in Christianity? Well, it's the person. And the treasure is the relationship with him now, as well as for the future, the hope and promise that we have, after we die. So it's trying to get Christians to finish well, to think correct thoughts to the very end. So despite these power and prisons and persecutions and pursuit, that we continue to treasure the person of God and the promises of God and the hope that we have in him. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you tomorrow.